Great. So in today's session, I'm going to be talking about leveraging digital technology to more effectively manage legal compliance. To get started, I'll take a look at the global regulatory landscape. And within this, I'm going to focus in on two specific areas. And that's knowing what law you need to comply with, and then how that links to knowing whether or not you actually comply. And when I speak of compliance, I'm going to specifically touch on environmental and occupational health and safety legal compliance, although there are obviously other areas that apply to this topic. I'll step through changes to the law and the challenges in staying up to date, the role of technology, and then some practical examples by demonstrating the Libryo platform. And I hope you'll be able to relate to some of these concepts and challenges, whether you're responsible for EHS at a single facility, across a global portfolio of facilities, or are just looking at ways to better access the law. So when it comes to what law you need to comply with, we believe the problem is that law is not necessarily too complicated. It's just that it's not very well organized. And that's not to suggest that lawmakers themselves are disorganized. It's just to point out that the world's law is made up of over 190 countries, all with their own national regulators. On top of this, more than half of these countries have subnational regulators too, meaning not only are there national or federal laws at a country level, there are also provincial or state laws, and then possibly even local or city bylaws too, all of which carry a legal risk. Add to this the variety of different languages, and then add the fact that the law is published in many different formats, some of which aren't easily accessible or even available. And so what you're left with is this complex collection of regulations that may or may not apply to you, that aren't easy to understand, and that require multiple different sources or service providers just for access. It leaves you with a lot of questions. And to put this into context, if you're based in the UK and you have a facility in Vietnam or China, for example, how do you know your legal obligations at these facilities? Do you have a local source? Is it provided to you in a language that you understand? And how many different service providers do you rely on to actually solve this? Again, it's complicated. The second part to this problem, as I pointed out, is that the law changes. According to a recent Thomson Reuters publication, regulatory change was reported as the top compliance challenge for 2020 to 2021. Now, there may be a lot of reasons for this, and we don't need to go into them. But the challenge remains, once you have your list of legal requirements, how do you stay up to date when there are changes? And how do you know if these changes impact you? And this is where the use of technology gets really interesting. At Libryo, we believe it's possible to solve the world's regulatory mess by reorganizing the law. Ultimately, we believe all legal requirements and related content will be converted into a form of legal data, and that software applications will track this for changes and make it cross-comparable between different legal jurisdictions and across different languages. And the reason I'm here today is because at Libryo, we've already started doing this. We're using machine learning and natural language processing to augment a process of ingesting the world's law and reorganizing it into a uniform set of legal data. We're essentially building the world's legal data gigafactory. And so once you start to think of law as data and breaking this down into digital components to solve the problem, the challenges I spoke of in terms of knowing the law and staying up to date with it start to fall away. So what does this mean exactly? Well, it means a single source of the world's regulatory law, a single source of all legal obligations for all industries in every legal jurisdiction, available through a live API to third-party software applications. So before I go into a live demonstration of the Libryo platform, I just want to recap very quickly on what exactly a Libryo stream is and how these are developed per customer. Essentially, these are created using the operational context, which we get from the customer. So that's a set of questions that the customer provides the answers to. And those questions are things like not just what industry are you in, but they are detailed questions about what takes place at the specific site in question. And we use that information and we map it against the legal data that is associated to the jurisdiction that it falls within. And together that is able to provide us with this unique Librio stream per site, which is bespoke to that particular customer based on what they do and where they do it. And I'll show you a little bit more about how that looks when I take you into the Librio platform. So as mentioned, Librio is a software as a service solution. It's cloud-based and accessible via your web browser or smart device. And when we implement the solution, we give each user their own specific login credentials, which allows the platform to tailor the experience to their needs according to their specific job to be done. And so for the instance, or for the purposes of this presentation, I have created a set of demo Librio streams that are not specific to any particular operation. They are examples of the types of activities that take place at these different types of operations. So for example, I've created a demo for the Verdantix headquarters. You can see here by toggling through the map that this is located in London. I can view where exactly that's located. But simply by clicking on requirements, I now have the ability to pull my set of legal requirements that are associated or applicable to this particular office in London. And you can see the different levels of authorities, the different regulators, and you can see the different domains of law. But to show you the power of the solution, when you have this legal content available to you in a data format, I want to toggle between site to site. So I'm going to go from the context in London to an example in Germany, which in this instance is an offshore wind farm. And here you can see it's now pulled my set of legal requirements at this specific operation, which is an offshore wind farm in Germany. And I can see now on the map, I can view pretty much where it's located in the ocean. Again, if I wanted to view a different operations, I can go again, switch between the Librio streams. And this time I'm now viewing a oil and gas facility in Canada. If I wanted to view an example in China, for example, I can go now to an office location in China. Again, showing you on the map where exactly this is. And again, I have the ability to pull legal requirements associated to that specific operation. And here you can see the set of legal requirements that are applicable to this office site in China. To show you another example, I am going to take you to an office site in the USA. And again, I've now toggled to yet another country, and simply at the click of a button, I have access to the legal requirements at this different location, the office in the USA, and in this instance in Austin, Texas. But I'm going to go back into the Verdantix head office solution that I've showed you initially, and I'm going to demonstrate how easy it is to work within your set of legal requirements by showing you the capabilities of the Librio platform. So starting off, I want to show you how you can search for things. And you can either search by topic or search for the legislation itself. But in this instance, I want to search for the law associated to working hours. So there we go, is my topic of working hours. And you can see there it's now pulled the requirements associated specifically to working hours. And if I go into this act, there's a regulation. And within this regulation, you can see the sections that are applicable to this office. So like I mentioned, we provide you the site-specific solution. So if I toggle this button off, it'll show you all of the legislation. But if I leave it on, it'll show you what's relevant to you. So it's filtered out what's not applicable to you. Within these sections, I can view my reading on the reading pane on the right. I can view the full text as it's published. And on the left, I have access to a plain language summary, which ultimately means I don't need to be legally trained to understand what this means to me. I can also translate this into a variety of different languages based on my needs. And there are a bunch of other collaboration tools built into this that help me manage understanding the legal requirements at that facility. So to show you again, a section linked to daily rest, it'll take me to that full text on the right, and it'll give me a plain language summary here on the left, where again, I can translate that into the set of different languages. And I want to toggle now to a different Librio stream. and it's going to keep the same search topic of working at heights and take me to the requirements at the different stream that I'm now looking into, which is the German offshore wind farm. So here you can see it's now pulled these 6 results for me that are linked to working hours. You can see that this legislation is published in German, but the same functionality applies. I could see the specific sections that are applicable to me. I could toggle that off and see all of the sections within these requirements, or I could just leave what's applicable to me. If I go into these specifics, it takes me to the reading pane on the right. But I don't have to be German speaking in order to understand this, because there's the facility that translates this into English. This full text on the right is now translated into English here on the left. But also, if I don't speak English, I can also use the plain language translation to translate it into whichever language that I require. So there, very quickly, you can see how easy it is when you have a tool like this to navigate from site to site and to view the different requirements that are associated to each of those sites. Again, this data is being pulled into the Libryo application from our legal data gigafactory, and that legal data is available through API into third-party software applications as well. Now, associated to knowing your legal requirements is staying up to date when there are changes. I mentioned the law is ever changing, and one of the challenges in being legally compliant was staying up to date with changes. So Libryo tracks the legal sources that provide us with this legal content and notifies the system anytime there is a change in this legislation. And this notification is then associated to the particular Libryo streams that are impacted by it. And any user that is associated to that stream will then get an email notifying them that there has been a change that impacts them at their stream. And so you can see here is a set or a list of changes associated to this offshore wind farm. And you can see most of these or all of these are actually red under the date. They're red in color. And when I click into this particular change, I can view what exactly that means. Again, I get the highlights of what that particular change refers to. I can at all times view the source of where that change was published. And now that I've clicked out of it, you can see the color has changed to an amber. And the idea behind that is to give users the ability to monitor and stay on top of their legal changes. So if I click at the bottom here and say that I've read this and I understand how it impacts me, I click I've read and understood, you can see that now goes green. And if I wanted to know which other sites that were impacted by this particular change, I could view the applicable Libryo streams over here, and you can see these 4 sites are also impacted by this particular change. But because I'm associated to this site, I'm getting these legal updates. My colleague who's maybe associated only to the Verdantix head office in London doesn't necessarily need to see these and therefore wouldn't get these notifications. So if I go into the corporate head office in London, you can see the same facility applies. Anytime there is a change in the legislation, these notifications get sent out to the applicable users. So the idea behind this is that anytime you get an update, you know that that particular update impacts you based on your access, based on your job to be done. So the same thing applies. I go into this update, I can view more information about it. I can see which other applicable Libryo streams are impacted by this, and the same facility, I can read and understand it just to manage staying on top of the legal changes that impact me. So this gives you an overview on the first problem that we highlighted, and that was knowing your applicable requirements and staying up to date when there are changes that impact you. The second part of the problem that I mentioned was knowing whether or not you actually comply with your applicable legal requirements. And so Libryo has an assessment module which allows users to conduct self-assessments at a facility level or at a site level. And ultimately, that information is then able to report or feedback into a management dashboard, which gives management or leadership or the executive team visibility on exactly what takes place at each of the facility in terms of the level of legal compliance. Now, I'm conscious of time, and so I'm going to step through this quite quickly. But here you can see essentially is a dashboard demonstrating the current level of legal compliance at the office, which is the Verdantix headquarters in London. This is none of the item, one item has been assessed so far. And here you can see a list of the assessment items that would be associated to the site. And these are ultimately made up of the requirements that I showed you earlier that are applicable to that site. So you are able to assess your level of compliance associated to your actual legal requirements at this particular site. You can filter this down just to make it slightly easier. Here I'm just going to filter into the occupational health and safety, into working environment, and in particular in lighting, health and safety management. And you can see that now filters down to the one item that I have actually assessed. And in this instance, I'm actually legally compliant. So now this dashboard has gone to 100% compliant, and the robot has changed to green because the level of risk associated is now low. But to give you an example on what that looked like, this particular assessment item is to maintain workplace lighting levels. And within this assessment item, you can see the underlying legislation that makes up this particular assessment item. And so this is based again on your set of requirements at this site, which I showed you. So I can view these requirements. I can go into why this assessment item is relevant, and you can see the same functionality, the full text, the plain language summary, etc. You have the ability to upload files, and the reason you do this is because once you've actually done the assessment, if you've clicked yes, for example, you are then prompted to actually to justify your response for saying yes, which would require you to upload some sort of evidence. And that could be in the shape of photographic evidence or documentation of some sort. You could collaborate further inside this the assessment item. You can comment to colleagues, but you could also create a task and assign this to a team member. So you might need a specific facilities personnel to actually conduct this assessment for you, and you can create a task and assign it to them. So I'm just going to give you a very quick view on what that would look like. I'm creating a test task. You could input a due date. You could say that it's fairly urgent and I need it done shortly. You could then assign that to the relevant person. So I'm going to assign it to Malcolm, who you'll be hearing from a little bit later today. I'm going to say that this particular task is actually quite urgent, so the priority level is very high. And then I could assign it to a project and associate a number of other tasks to that project. But in this instance, we're just doing it for a demo. So when I create this task, you can see it now, it's tracked in this particular assessment item, but Malcolm will also get an email prompting him that he's got a task that he needs to go in and view. And when he does that, he will then be able to see the information or the task required of him, its due date, and its level of, or its priority. He could then further collaborate inside this task if he needed some support, but he could ultimately complete the task and evidence it, which in this instance might be demonstrating that there is sufficient lighting. So I'm going to click on here. He can actually complete the task, and then I will get a notification as the person who created the task that it's now been done. And then you can see he's completed the task. If for whatever reason he'd missed something, if I had said to him, for example, you've forgotten to attach the document, I'm going to say, I'm going to comment at him. I'm going to say, please attach the document. He'll get another notification. This is just to demonstrate how he could then go and attach that document. He would then go in, upload the file into the file folder, which you can then view at a later stage. You associate it to the specific folder within this file structure. And so in this instance, it might be an inspection that he wants to upload or evidence of this inspection. You can then go in and upload it from your source. And that will then be linked to this specific task. And it will also be stored in the Drive feature, which is another collaboration tool in the platform. If I wanted to now review this particular document that he's uploaded, I could click on this, and here we go. I can see this lovely picture of the document that Malcolm uploaded for me to evidence his compliance or to complete the task that I had assigned for him. And so very quickly there, you can see now with the assess module, how now you complete the second part of the problem, which is knowing whether or not you actually comply to your legal requirements. So we're running very low on time. Very quickly, just to recap, you can see how the Libryo platform gives you the ability to access your legal requirements that are applicable to you at your operations. It keeps you up to date with these requirements, and it gives you tooling to actually assess and demonstrate your level of legal compliance associated to your requirements. I hope that's been interesting. Thank you very much for listening. Back to you, Bill.